On Monday, June 24, 1935, an article in the Sacramento Bee announced that 69 scouts and scouters would be representing the Sacramento area at the National Jamboree in Washington, D.C. The article goes on to describe the stops the special Jamboree train would make en route to the Jamboree location. The article also lists the cities the scouts will visit when returning home after the Jamboree concludes. These cities include Atlanta, Montgomery, New Orleans, El Paso, and Los Angeles. However, since the Jamboree was canceled, the return trip was also altered. In our third and final video on this amazing scrapbook, we will also learn a little bit more about the 3 scouts whose names appear on the first page of the first volume in this edition of Artifact of the Week. Before we take a look at the return trip, let's go back to the June Sacramento Bee article and see how they describe the scouts making this historic trip. The majority of the scouts to attend are Eagle Scouts over 15 years of age. All must have received merit badges for safety, first aid, camping, pioneering, civics, public health, personal health, pathfinding, and life-saving. The article closes by saying the trip will cost each scout about $145. In today's dollars, that would be $3,340, so not too far off from what a scout might pay today for a trip to the Jamboree in West Virginia. So what did the return trip look like? When we left the scrapbook in our last video, the scouts had fallen asleep at about 11:30, and the departure of the train from the station in Washington was so smooth it didn't wake the scouts up. In fact, they attributed to a new engineer. We were up at 6 the next morning feeling pretty good, had 7 hours sleep, and found out that we had passed through Pittsburgh at 4:15 that morning. At 6:45 we passed through Youngstown, and at 7:30 we passed through Akron, and we saw the Goodrich tire plant. The weather has turned cooler and we are certainly enjoying ourselves. Then at 8:25 we passed through Greenwich, and the country is more beautiful than ever. It's 9:47 we passed through North Baltimore, and at 10:07 we stopped at Delker to take on water and cold. We passed through Holgate at 10:34, and we still have those large fields of corn on both sides. Just crossed the Maumee River and into the town of Defiance, passed through Mock Center at 11:02, and 3 minutes later we were in Indiana, and at 11:15 we passed through St. Joe. Here we set our watches back 1 hour and had to wait another hour for lunch. They pulled into the Baltimore and Ohio station in Chicago at 2 p.m. We walked over to the Skyline Athletic Club and went up to the 27th story and had a nice refreshing swim in very ill-fitting bathing suits. As soon as we came out, we marched over to the Harmony Cafeteria and had dinner. While we were eating, Trevor slipped as he was carrying some water and dropped and broke a glass, giving those at the table next to him a free swim. We took the doilies as souvenirs. There is one in the envelope opposite. When we got out, we had tickets to ride on the elevated, so we climbed aboard and started on a tour of the backs of tenements and junkyards and open-air sewers. It certainly was an awe-inspiring sight. That is, if you go in for that sort of scenery. But we did see the Cubs ballpark and the ever-sharp pen and pencil building. Then, just as the scenery began to get better, we came to the end of that part of the line and were informed that we should have transferred a mile or so back along the line. So we boarded the same cars and went all the way back to where we had gotten on there and got off. Went down to the street level and went to a show for the rest of the evening. In the middle of the most exciting part, we had to get up and leave, so we got out our map and figured out where the new station was, where we were to go, and we headed toward it after some argument. In the Union Station, we found out that the train was not going to leave until 12, and it was only 10:15. Then, so we had hurried all for nothing. We did not like Chicago as much the second time. It was so much dirtier than New York, and the people here are not so friendly as they are in New York. The next stop for the Scouts will be St. Paul, Minnesota. In preparation for their time here, they are changing into clean uniforms. We are now in St. Paul. At 8:25, we are going through the large railroad yards and are coming into the Union Station. We got off and hurried in to get our bus seats. These buses are the single-deck type, and there are 30 of us in each bus. Now as we leave the station on our right is the Kroll Company. St. Paul has between 400,000 and 500,000 population. This bus tour will take them past several locations, such as the airport with its traditional land runways, as well as a seaplane pond. Stores called the Golden Rule and the Emporium, the Mann Building, and the Minnesota State Capitol Building. They pass through the historic residential area with older brick and stone structures, as well as a more modern residential area with many beautiful modern homes. We are now going under this end of the Ford Bridge and are stopping at the Ford Assembly Plant here in St. Paul. The plant is right on the banks of the river, and the government locks are just below us with the dam and a power plant and the Ford Bridge in the background. This can be seen below and to the left. Across and down the river a little way is the old soldiers' home. With the Ford power plant ahead, down the river is the Ford's own glass plant, and they make their own glass from the sandstone cliffs they have here. This is the head of navigation on the Mississippi. There is always at least a 6-foot channel. Last year a cloudburst took out the single lock they used to have, so now they have put in a larger double one that will handle another emergency much better. There are 15 bridges between the Twin Cities. There is little over 1 million population in the two cities, St. Paul being the smaller of the two. These buses have the best seats we have had yet on any bus or train. There is a $50 fine for anyone throwing a bottle in the streets and a $50 reward for the person who turns him in. Now we are crossing the Ford Bridge into Minneapolis. While in Minneapolis, they pass statues of Minnehaha and Hiawatha, the old zoo, and a replica of the Longfellow home. On the left is the Walter Hines Page School for Boys, and now on our left is the Nicollet Avenue Bridge. This is the main street in the town and runs the whole length. Lyndale Avenue is the longest street in Minneapolis. It runs from one end of the state to the other. Now on our left is Lake Harriet, and we turned on East Lake Harriet Drive onto Kings Highway. On our right is the famous Rose Garden with a rose from every state in it. On our left now is the Lake Harriet Bandstand, and on our right is the Lakewood Cemetery, one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the world. Now on our right is Lake Calhoun. There are 10 large lakes in Minneapolis, that is not counting the chains of lakes to separate. They are all natural. Now left across the lake is the Minnesota Golf Course. You can fish in all of these lakes, and minnows are the best bait. Remember that, Robert. On the end of the lake are mounted the mast and wheel of the frigate Minneapolis. And now on our left is a tower marking the highest spot in Minneapolis. The stadium at the university seats 52,000 people. Now on our right is a private school for rich boys. Now we go down West Grant Street from Willow Street, and on our right and seen below is the Minneapolis Auditorium. This is a $3 million building and has a $100,000 pipe organ and seats 16,000 people. Now on our left is the Westminster Presbyterian Church, and on the right is the YWCA, now on Nicollet Avenue. This is the heart of the Loop District. The Forshey Building is on our right. It is 32 stories high and built in the shape of the Washington Monument. It is built to withstand storms and earthquakes and may be seen below and to the right in the foreground of the picture. Minneapolis is the greatest flower city in the world. We are now going down Washington Avenue, and now we are crossing a bridge and seeing barges and docks where they are loading flour and coal. The university is straight ahead of us and on both sides of the highway. This university has a large broadcasting station on the grounds, and now on our right is the large university hospital. To our right, as we travel around, we see the stadium and large gym. Now on our left is the old brick building that used to be the entire college. This town used to be called St. Anthony. On the right is the old Godfrey House. It was the first frame building in the town. Now on our left, we can just see the top of the old St. Anthony Town Hall. Now we are getting off of these to board our train. We have to wait a few minutes, and what happens? The photographer from the Minneapolis Tribune steps up and asks Bob and another boy to pose for a picture for his paper. Goes the light, and Bob is in front page news. Would you give us your autograph? While we are waiting, something else about the city might not be so bad. The streets are very clean as they are washed and brushed continually. It is perhaps the cleanest town we have been in. We finally boarded the train at 1 o'clock and soon pulled out and right away passed another lake. Over the next 4 hours, the scouts and their train continue west. About an hour and a half into this run, they pass the first Dutch windmill they have seen on the trip. At 5:30, they enter North Dakota and stop in Fargo for 15 minutes. And during that time, we went on strike for better food and more of it. The chef came out in a huff and tried to throw us out of the car, but somehow or another he did not seem to like the job, as we had several boys over 6 feet tall. After much hemming and hawing, we were told that if we wanted to eat last, we were nearly last anyway, that we could have all we wanted. This was decided on being fair with us, so we called off the strike and cleared out the dining car. About 6 hours later, the train crosses into Montana around 11:45 p.m. The Scouts have noted all of the agriculture and livestock they've seen, noting that North Dakota is known for its sugar beets and the plains of Montana for wheat, barley, oats, and corn. They also claim to be ahead of schedule at this point. At 1:15, we passed through Shelby, which is noted for producing oil. It has a population of 537. Just past a helium gas plant on the side of the tracks are many oil and natural gas wells. At 2 o'clock, we passed through Cut Bank and over the Cut Bank River. We now have our first glimpse of the snow-covered mountains of Glacier National Park. We just passed the farthest point north that the Lewis and Meriwether Exploration Party got. We passed through Meriwether at 2:38 and stopped at Blackfoot at 3:05 for a couple of minutes. We are now coming out of the plains and are starting to climb. Passed through the first snow shed. We passed 2 Medicine River and stopped at Glacier National Park Hotel, in front of which there are some teepees of the Blackfeet Indians. We were entertained by chiefs Shortman, Spotted Bear, Little Calf, and Bullchild. Their pictures can be seen below, who are members of the Blackfeet tribe. They put on the grass dance and the rabbit dance for us. One Indian told us a story in sign language and one of them translated it for us. They then put on the dove dance and showed us an Indian game. They took up a collection. They made Mr. Lindblad a member of their tribe and named him Chief Iron Mountain after one of the mountains of Glacier Park. Pictures can be seen below of Lindblad joining the tribe and a picture of Iron Mountain. We went up to the hotel and went inside. The lobby is a very beautiful lobby. A picture can be seen below. We sent our mothers a little blanket. We then went back to the train and had dinner. After dinner, we went back to the hotel and saw more Indian dances and got signatures of all the Indians, which can be seen below. At 5:30, we got up and saw a beautiful sunrise. On one side of the train can be seen the Grand Range of Mountains, and on the other side, the Glacier Park Motel. At 7:30, we ate breakfast on the train, and at 8 o'clock, we all piled into open-top buses and start for the interior of Glacier National Park. On our way in, we saw a few red-tailed hawks. We again passed over 2 Medicine River, and on our left is 2 Medicine Valley, and the lower 2 Medicine Lake. There are 250 lakes in the park, and the park covers 1,571 square miles. We are now passing some of the CCC camps. On our left is Rising Wolf Mountain and Rockwell Mountain. It is starting to rain and is cold as ballsies. Now on our right is the Blackfoot reservations and the burial grounds of Chief Two Guns, Whitecap, whose picture is on the U.S. nickel. We stopped by Swift Current Lake and pitched camp. It's pictured below. We then had dinner, and what a big dinner. At 1:25, while on a little hike, we scared up a bear just in back of camp. We then went fishing in Lake Josephine and caught nothing. We then came back and fished in the stream by camp and saw our first 2 beaver. We then ate dinner, and after dinner we had a campfire and then we went to bed. In the morning, after breakfast, we went on a hike up to Grinnell Glacier and took a picture of it. There is also a picture of the gang on the trail. The ranger that led the hike pointed out several mountain goats to us that were on peaks of mountains. We then stopped at the bottom of the glacier and ate our lunch. After lunch, we started up the glacier, and at the bottom of the glacier is a mixture of powdered rock and water that acts like quicksand. We then walked part of the way across the glacier. That night, we took a hike to the other side of Swift Current Lake and saw Swift Current Falls. We then went inside the hotel and looked around. We then went back to camp, and on our way back, we saw a bear. The next morning, after we finished eating, we got into buses and started for Going to the Sun Chalet. We first passed Blackfoot Glacier, the biggest glacier in the park. The elevation of Logan Pass is 6,000 feet. A picture of the winding road that we went over can be seen on the next page. We stopped on the road to see 2 bears. All the cars in Glacier Park have boards on the top of their cars with nails in them to keep the bears off. Now on our right is Mevins Peak. We stopped a minute at Logan Falls and then went on to Lake McDonald. We left Lake McDonald and went to Belden and boarded the train for Whitefish. At Whitefish, we went swimming. After the swim, we came back to the train and had dinner. We went to bed. We passed through Idaho that night. The Scouts got up at 6 on the morning of August 28th. They are now in Washington State and passing through Apple Country. At 6:15, we stopped at Waumachi to get ice and water, and there is a large stream running along the side of the town. This is an apple town and a huge cold storage plant. We passed through Kashmir at 7:09. Instead of fields of corn, there's a lot of apple orchards. At 7:22, we passed through Frazen and Leavenworth at 7:26, another apple town. We are now going down a beautiful canyon lined with pine trees and a creek along the side of the railroad tracks. At 8:15, we passed through Bern, and at 8:16, we entered the Cascade Tunnel, which is 8 miles long. We thought we would never get out of it. We passed through Everett, a town with a population of 28,000 at 11:20. We think this kind of country has the East beaten all to pieces with the pine trees and the snow-covered peaks and waterfalls. On our right is Puget Sound. We arrived in Seattle at 12:35. We got off at the Kingston station and took streetcars out to Washington Lake where we went swimming. It is 23 miles long and 3 miles wide with Mercer Island in the middle of it. We then got on streetcars and went to the Chamber of Commerce where we had dinner. There is 103 square miles in the city and 3 freshwater lakes. We then passed the Carnegie Library. Ahead of us is the Metropolitan Building. On our left is the new Olympia Hotel. We are now in the First Hill District where the oldest buildings of the city are located. Straight ahead is the Daughters of the American Revolution home that is a reproduction of Mount Vernon. We are now on East Highland Drive and are entering Volunteer Park. There are 47 parks in the city. On our left is the city reservoir. This city owns its own power. We now see a statue of Seward, who bought Alaska for the United States. Next is Lake Union, connected by canals with Lake Washington and the Sound, and off to our right is the Cascade Range. The University District covers 540 acres. There are 30 buildings on the university ground. They house 11,000 students. Ahead of us is a monument of Washington, and on our right is a monument of J.J. Hill, the great northern builder. After we left the Fraternity District, we entered Woodland Park. One thing we noted is that there are very many tennis courts in this park. In all the parks, there are 244 tennis courts. From there we went to the government locks. These locks are second in size with the Panama Canal locks. This canal runs from Puget Sound to Lake Union. After leaving the locks, we went over the Washington Bridge. This bridge is 3/4 of a mile long and 176 feet high. Following the tour of the Seattle area, the Scouts went to a show, although they don't specify what the show was, and then returned to the train and departed Seattle. The next morning, August 29th, when we awoke, we were passing through Vancouver, Washington. After leaving Vancouver, we crossed the Columbia River into Oregon. On both sides of the river, we see log rafts tied to the shore. We arrived in Oregon at 8:12 and then passed through the little town of Willbridge at 8:29. As soon as we left the little town, it started raining and continued raining until we arrived in Portland. We got off the train and boarded buses and went through the heart of the financial district. The population of Portland is 300,000. Portland covers over 70 square miles, and within the 70 square miles, there are 237 churches. 3/5 of the population is on the east side of the river. 75% of the business is done on the west side of the river. We then visited the largest log cabin in the world. 250 logs, 72 feet high and 102 feet wide. There are 1 million board feet in the whole building. A piece of wood from the log cabin can be seen below. We had to get out and push the bus over a steep hill. We are now entering Washington Park. There are 23 parks in the city. On the right is a big rose garden. Below is a picture of one of the rose gardens. In the park, there are trees from all over the world. There are international test gardens for International Rose Society. On our right is the 4 reservoirs in which the city gets its water. The water is 99.4% pure. We met Mockford at the hotel where we had our lunch. Mockford is an old member of our home troop. He asked us to go over to Oregon City to spend the day swimming and canoeing. After spending the afternoon with Mockford, we went to the YMCA hotel and had supper. After supper, we went to a show with Mockford, and after the show, we went back to the station and went to bed. At 7:28, August 30th, we stopped a moment at Roseburg, Oregon. We passed through Myrtle Creek at 8:10. At 12:10, we stopped at Grants Pass, where we got 2 big salmon spinners and a spinning fly. We passed through Medford at 2:20 and Ashland at 3 o'clock. The elevation of Ashland is 1,890 feet, and the population is 6,000. We arrived in California at 4:38, crossed Klamath River, we saw Mount Shasta, we passed the base at 7:25. August 31st, we arrived home at 7 o'clock. As I have said several times, this is one of the most detailed scrapbooks or diaries I've encountered here in the collection. In addition to the writing, the book is full of a variety of items that help to tell the story. So how did these 3 scouts manage to write in such great detail? There may be 2 clues in another diary maintained by a 4th scout from Northern California on the same trip. William J. Perry of Auburn, California said in a 2010 article, "The events of this extraordinary journey may well have been documented by other scouts, but this recall came after finding my diary long packed away with its pages fragile, brown, and age-worn. still bound together within the covers of the leather scrapbook tooled in summer camp the year before. The expressions and descriptions of our visits across America and some stories of our daily events were taken from this diary with few changes, except to shorten those poorly constructed pages written at late hours of the night in a rocking railroad car. This statement indicates that it is highly likely all of these scouts plan to keep a detailed journal of the trip and their adventures, which would account for why there is such great detail in their writing. It is also likely that the 3 scouts broke up the tasks of documenting their activities and collecting artifacts as the trip progressed. Finally, I believe it's likely, and might even argue the most plausible explanation, that once they returned home, they compiled their notes and artifacts to produce the volumes we're enjoying today. I believe this to be true because the items are placed in very specific locations within the text, are directly referenced throughout the manuscript, and in some cases are even marked to indicate where and how they were obtained or secured. So who were the 3 scouts that assembled this very cool artifact? Harold and Robert McCurry were brothers. Harold was born in 1919 and Robert was born in 1921. This would have made them 16 and 14 when the trip was taken. Both earned their Eagle Scout rank in December 1935 with Troop 1 in Sacramento, California. Upon their return home, Harold was tapped to be a public speaker as part of the Boy Scouts' mobilization for better citizenship, beginning in 1936 when he addressed the Sacramento Men's Luncheon Club and the Sacramento High School PTA. Robert went on to become the first Camp Cody junior camp director in 1937 and 1938. Camp Coney, regarded by many as the best backwoods camp in the Sierras, is an off-the-grid scout camp founded in 1937 and is unique because it is a camp that is owned, operated, and maintained by Troop 1 of Sacramento. During the summer, an older scout called the junior camp director leads the camp and works with a team of a dozen other older scouts called junior officers, and together they collectively deliver the camp's daily program. Scouts can earn merit badges, explore the outdoors, and learn leadership and teamwork skills in this incredible setting at 7,250 feet. There's no electricity and there's no roads into Camp Cody. As a result, Camp Cody provides an authentic week of backwoods camping that Scouts have enjoyed for almost 90 years. After graduating from high school, Harold attended college at San Jose State College, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree in Commerce in 1940. He married Betty Gibbons on March 7, 1941. Robert went on to graduate from Sacramento Junior College and then on to study photography at the Art Center in Los Angeles. Robert married Jeanette Foss on March 25, 1943. Both of them worked at the Sacramento Air Depot as photographers prior to World War II. On August 18, 1942, Harold and Robert enlisted in the United States Army at the Army Recruiting Office in Sacramento. After basic training at Monterey, they returned to the Sacramento Air Depot, where they were accepted into Officers Training School in Miami Beach, Florida. On January 28, 1943, the brothers graduated from Officers Candidate School and were commissioned as second lieutenants in the Army Air Corps, working in administrative and supply roles. Following the war, the McCurry brothers returned home to Sacramento, where they assumed leadership of the McCurry Photo Company, founded by their father in 1908. Both of the brothers also remained engaged in scouting, with Robert serving as Scoutmaster of Troop 1 and Harold serving as Committee Chairman of the troop. Harold also served on the executive board of their local council, and in 1976, the brothers were awarded the Distinguished Eagle Scout Award. After retiring from his position with McCurry Photo, Harold went on to become an avid bicyclist, riding more than 4,000 miles each year. He passed away in April 1999 at the age of 80. Robert retired from the family business in the 1990s, and he passed away in December of 1997. The third scout was Howard Topping. Howard was born in January 1916 in San Francisco, California, making him the oldest of the 3 scouts. Howard earned his Eagle Scout rank with Troop 1 on December 7, 1932. He was the 7th scout in the history of the troop to become an Eagle Scout. Following high school, Howard attended Stanford University, graduating with a bachelor's degree in 1937. He immediately went to work with Bank of America and began volunteering with the scout troops in the communities where he lived. Howard joined the Army in 1941 and rose from private to the rank of major. As a major, Howard commanded an infantry battalion in Europe in late 1944, where he was wounded by a German sniper while leading his troops against the German Army in November. For his actions at the time, he was awarded a Silver Star. After the war, Howard returned to Bank of America, where he was promoted several times. In 1956, he was named as an Assistant Vice President of Business Development. Outside of his banking career, Howard was also very involved with the American Red Cross and served on the national board of the organization. Howard remained active in the Army National Guard and became a lieutenant colonel commanding an infantry unit in California. Howard was married to his wife, Donalda, and they had 2 children. Topping died in March of 1999. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Join us next time as we continue to learn more about the history of Scouting America through the collection of the National Scouting Museum and Artifact of the Week.